Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Welcome. Really appreciate this. Love having a little bit of a crowd. Not just me talking to Dave Adams or Dan Anton. Welcome. So this presentation is really about research I've been doing for a long time, probably since about 2001, really, and has evolved and turned into different publications and presentations and some work that has been generated by my colleagues at UVic as well, Barton Cunningham and Jim McGregor. I just met with Bart this morning. We're good friends and live close by and continue to work on research together, and he opened up one of his fabulous books that he's written and seems to have time to write. And in it he said, see, I acknowledged you here, so my name is in the acknowledgements in one book too, so that's always great. Can I add that to my resume, do you think? This presentation is about problem solving, and it's really for us, it's for Royal Roads. More and more I want to be conducting research where we're looking internally at ourselves and trying to solve problems that we're all struggling or wrestling with here at our beloved university. You know, I love this place, I love the promise of this place, I love the students and all these great people that we work with. It's a fabulous environment to be operating within. And so I've designed and structured this talk so that it also invites you in to use some of the tools that we've developed and apply them here in our own context. So it's about unlocking creative insight. And I'll talk a little bit about creative insight and what that means and how it differs from creativity, but also about barriers. You know, we all face barriers in our personal lives, in our work lives, in our hobbies and community lives. And I love barriers, actually, because to me they're walls that then open with doorways and windows and have little nooks and crannies that we can find our way through. And on the other side of those barriers are our values and our goals that we're actually striving to achieve. So they're actually like springboards to solutions. I'll talk a little bit about barriers and how barriers work in my mind. And this concept of then leading to integrative solutions. And integrative is an important word for me because we find in the work that we've done with individuals, organizations, groups, teams, is that the best solutions are those that solve the whole problem, the system, the systemic issue. Okay? And Marilyn mentioned, you know, I've always loved, this all began with my love for high performance. So this is a team of mine that I was lucky enough to participate with. And that has led me to wanting to understand better how we function in groups and teams and organizations and in our communities and in society as a whole, right? How can we work collaboratively more effectively? You know, the pace and complexity of our world just keeps increasing. We're kind of overwhelmed with information now, okay? So do we have the tools to really navigate that and manage it well and adapt to it and be truly responsive instead of just inundated and overwhelmed like I feel when I open an inbox, right? After this presentation, for instance, right? My God, how many will be waiting? And so with my interest in performance, I really noticed studying athletes over the years and then students. I taught in the K-12 system for many years and watching the students, watching my own children develop and grow. I was so fascinated by this concept of between a challenge or stimulus and a response, that there's this space. And we don't understand what's going on, I don't think, very well in learning, in high performance in, you know, a sports setting, and in organizational performance. We're challenged, we respond, and there's this opportunity and space that I'm not sure we understand. And so I started, again, spurred by an interest in children and development. That's my little boy there. He's now 13. A little indicator of how long this research has been going on. I think I brought him to my supervisor. The first time I met Bart was with a baby in my arms. He was like about 4 months old or something. And that led me into all these pathways of understanding what flow means, what optimism, and the role of locus of control and self-efficacy and creativity. And I started going down all these paths, as you do when you're launching into research, to try to better understand how to unlock individuals, their performance, their potential, their possibility. And I started to hone in on this concept of problem solving as a real key. How we problem solve, how we make decisions in any context really determines how we're going to perform. And problem solving, I think still now, we're very functional about our problem solving, very linear. We come up with some, here's the problem, And we identify some goals, then we identify some alternative solutions, and then we evaluate which one would be best. But the problem with that is that we don't spend enough time actually analyzing what the problem is. So we end up solving some problem that isn't actually the problem. And we create a whole list of other problems. And we do that in organizations really well. And so what I discovered as I delved more deeply into problem solving is that there's this giant array of other avenues you could be pursuing and understanding when you're exploring problem solving, and creative problem solving in particular. This idea of remote association, bringing concepts together to unlock new insights, our ability to include more in our attentional breadth, so be real systems thinkers. What adaptation and innovation really involve, the idea of framing problems, conceptually combining divergent thinking, problem finding. So all these concepts were really interesting to me, and I started to pull the threads together with my colleagues and build a model of sorts. And then these guys struck me. Kahneman and Tversky have done some really seminal work on decision making. And this particular article, written in the 80s, was born of some experiments done with students at university. And I'll invite you into the experiment that they conducted and have replicated thousands of times. And actually, friends of mine have tried it with their groups of students as well and found the same results over and over again. So imagine this question here. This is a very simplified version of the experiment, and they have multiple approaches, but they present people with this situation. Imagine Canada is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual disease, and it's expected to kill about 600 people. And there are 2 alternative programs to combat the disease. If you choose program A, 200 people will be saved. If you choose program B, there's a chance that 600 people will be saved, but there's a risk that no one will be saved. Which would you choose? And so what they find is most people choose A. But then they tried something, a reframe, and presented the same problem, same context, but they described the program slightly differently. If program C is adopted, 400 people will die. If program D is adopted, there's a chance no one will die, or a risk that all will die. See the differences? 200 saved, 400 die. So it's actually the same, but they framed it slightly differently in terms of risk. And here is what happened. 22% chose the first one this time, and 78% the second one. So what does that say about our decision making? I don't think we're all that rational or linear, really. If we're that easily flipped, then to me, that's awesome. That means we have a lot of possibility to flip and shift paradigm and think differently. But it can also be quite scary for the linear thinkers, right? They are assuming that we think very logically, but actually we are governed by emotion, imagine. Complexity demands a trans and interdisciplinary approach, right? We have to think about more than just logic, than just rational components of ourselves. We're multifaceted human beings, so we really need to consider all of that. I think people tend to be a little afraid to think this way because it seems a little overwhelming. Oh, the problem's too wicked. It's too complex. I hate the word wicked, actually. I've just decided that today. Because it does have this really negative connotation that it's evil or mean or somehow untenable, hey? But it's just a complex problem. And I really, this is me with my optimistic side, but I really believe there's always a solution. And I've shared this, but I'll send out the PowerPoint, and it'll be included, too, in what goes out to the world that's watching, right? All 2 students of mine probably have tuned into this. But these concepts of holacracy and systems and networks, and I watched this guy, Aaron Dignan, speak really well, really articulately about systems and what we can learn from systems theory. It's been around forever, been studied forever. And the principles are just so helpful. We should be unpacking these concepts and diving in, not being afraid of it as something too complex. This principle of systems theory that in complex decision network, the potential to act effectively is conferred by an adequate concatenation, which is linking, of information. So understanding that we have to be linking in order to really make great decisions. What allows us to do that in organizations? And so as I meandered down this path and was looking deeply into insight and how it works, I realized that really framing plays such a huge role, as we could see from Kahneman and Tversky's experiments, right? How we frame something determines how we then act, how we see, what we're ready for, how we problem solve. How can we use this to help people generate more insightful, unlock more insightful solutions, unlock greater possibility, solve problems in more sustainable, integrative, awesome ways? We need to think more holistically, yes, about our rational systems and our cognition, but also about our emotion and physiology. We're physical beings, and not ignore all that. And in fact, if we really understand all those components, and I think that was, my athletic background led me into those paths. I wasn't afraid to look at physiology. I wasn't afraid to look at learning and cognition, because I'd been a teacher for so long. And then this concept of emotion. I'm just all emotion. I think I'm 99% emotion. And so that was no problem to explore too. I was really interested, and there's been so many great studies, so much great work done in these areas, but we don't link them together, I don't think, enough. And Gwen Hill and I were just talking about that, a more interdisciplinary approach to study. Love it here at Royal Roads. We live it with our schools. They're so integrated and build off each other, and we have threads that come through all of our schools and all of our programs, values that we believe in. And we're not afraid to be interdisciplinary in our approaches, maybe because we're small and no one's maybe watching too carefully, I don't know. But we need to be really very courageous, because yes, there's distinct fields, but linking them, as systems theory shows us, helps us make better decisions more insightfully. Understanding the role of a challenge, a stressor on our beings and on our minds and our emotions helps us to understand how we actually problem solve under stress. And we're all always under stress. Stress doesn't have to always be negative, but we're always being challenged, surprised. We're living in such an ambiguous world now. Right? It's just a constant onslaught. So we need to know how to deal with that. The work that Wendy Rowe and I are doing on thriving is showing that too. The ability to, see more holistically, to accept what you can't control. These concepts are relevant there as well. But we need to learn how to thrive amidst stress, because stress ain't going away, and we can't box it up and manage it. So understanding this interaction of mind, body, and emotion really became obvious to me as I was exploring problem solving. And this idea, and I love it when students ask, isn't that an old reading? It's such an old reading. Is it relevant? Wertheimer's still relevant, I think. 1959, it's just a marker of when someone was thinking deeply and had one of those insights. He's talking about this, the gestalt of problem solving too, right? And the more penetrating view of the problem will lead us to a more penetrating solution, a more sustainable and integrated solution. So we decided to focus in on insight, because insight is the aha that everybody talks about, the aha solution, right? Have you ever been given one of those crazy little puzzles at Christmas that you wrestle with, and your machinist uncle can solve it in a second, or your 7-year-old cousin can solve it really quickly, right? They don't have a lot of baggage, and they can penetrate very easily and quickly and see the solution. That's an insight problem, where it seems unsolvable and you feel kind of stuck and come up against something and, you have to think differently and reframe to unlock the solution. That can be handy in every context, right? We could use it here to solve some of the challenges at Royal Roads, some of the procedural, the messy, bureaucratic, they seem untenable, how that system works, or getting people to talk to each other. All of those things seem so difficult. But insight is really, I think, what's required. And it's a root finding in that you really need to drill down and understand the core of the issue, but also a root finding process, R-O-U-T-E, because you, as a human being, need to find your own pathway to that solution. Someone can tell you the solution. If you're not ready to hear it, you won't hear it. You won't see it. We found when we were working in more of a lab setting with experimental study, working with little actual problems and puzzles with individuals, often readiness played such a huge factor. Often they would actually find the solution, they'd unlock it, they'd do it, but they wouldn't see it. They weren't ready to see it yet, so they keep working away. They come back and work away at this little barrier, this little knot they'd be struggling with, and I'd be sitting there going, there's the solution right there, but they couldn't see it. Okay? So readiness is a huge piece of this as well. Root finding, drilling down to the core of the issue, but also finding your own pathway. And that's important for us as educators, right? We all get that. You can push a student to the solution, but that won't work. They need to find their own way to an insight. And so our model is this. Typically, a human being will appraise a situation, a challenge, as a problem or not, a threat or not. If it isn't a threat, we move on, right? We can solve it. But if it's a threat, we're kind of stopped. We then secondarily appraise whether we have the resources to solve that problem. Can I handle this? If not, I might freak out, and that's where your appraisal response comes in, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, or take off. And that's a really interesting little point, that secondary appraisal point. You appraise whether you have the resources or not. And if that stops you in your tracks, you're kind of hooped. You will narrow your focus, cue utilization. You'll narrow your focus, you'll only notice the threat, and you'll sort of fixate on it. You ever had that where you ruminate? You just can't get off of that track. You represent the problem as a threat, you represent it as a barrier, you're only seeing the barrier, and you're going to bang your head against that thing for some time. Your solutions are going to be very limited, i.e. head banging. And it just spins, you're stuck. We call it stuckedness. What we find is if you can spin off of that secondary appraisal point and do it again, come back and appraise, all right, I don't have the resources to solve this problem. It's too big, I don't know enough people, I don't have access to the O drive, I don't know where I'm going in the O drive, whatever. I'm a little lost, so I don't have the resources, I don't know what to do, and I feel a bit stuck. If you appraise that as a threat, then you will be in that big circle of just spinning. If you appraise it as, oh, well, that's okay, it's not a problem, I have other resources. I know where to look for other resources. I know where to, who to ask. I'm sure I'll find a way. Right? If you have that kind of appraisal, you will spin kind of off that ruminating track and into a new frame of the problem, which is kind of an accepting. Yeah, I don't have the resources, but I'm sure we'll be able to figure something out together. Or if I call a few more people in, or if I do some research or whatever, I'll find a new solution. And what happens is that gets you off of that ruminating track and into kind of a new possibility of solutions. You reframe the problem. And I'll illustrate this more in a few minutes. I want to just tell a couple of stories, because this is kind of how I understand this whole process to work. I live in the world of sports. All my kids are in sports, and it's 24/7 sports at our house. It's crazy. And I'm really fascinating. They're always my favorite participants to focus on, are these athletes or coaches. Even this morning, Bart and I were talking about new pathways for research, and I just come right back to sport all the time. Adam Van Couverden, one of my favorite athletes of all time. Really neat story. Although I have to do this little tangent. We were in Whistler at some bike race, and we're climbing up these stairs, and my husband's up ahead of me, and he knows I got a bit of a crush on Adam, actually. And he's up ahead of me, and he looks around at me and says, just you wait, you're going to see someone that you're going to be really excited to see. And as I came around the corner, there was Adam Van Couverden, and I literally just crumpled into like a little girl, and he's just howling, I'm like, hi, I didn't even know what to do. Anyway, love him as an athlete too. He has this great story from Athens, very hot at the Olympics there. And he had just won a bronze medal in one of his races, one of his events. He had another event coming up. He misses the bus to his race, which that happens sometimes. Usually a water event is far away and you have to bus there. So he misses his ride. So instead of panicking, which I think under that kind of stress and tension I would have, he does for a moment, but then he realizes, what is the problem? I can't get to the course right now. Get to the course somehow. So he could panic and freak out and try to call someone and vent about it and be angry and frustrated, or blame, or do all these crazy things that people do, or he could try to just solve the problem at hand. So he gets a taxi and gets there. Figures out a way to get there. Gets there, realizes he's left his music, his hat, all the stuff he has to get prepared for his race in the cab. Because again, a little nervous, a little freaked out, runs out. again, stops. What is the actual problem? Is it that I need to get those things from the cab? It's gone. There's no way I'm going to get it. So he accepts that. And I think this comes from being a high performer for a long time. You learn that right away. You have to let go of a lot of things that are beyond your control, like your competition, like the conditions, like your coach, and maybe their personality. And so I think he'd been trained to do that. So he let go. Okay, that stuff's gone. I need to still race. And so what's the problem now? I need to prepare for my race. Can I do it without my music? I can sing, right? I can hum to myself and give myself my own music. Can I race without my hat? It's really hot. There's a lot of glare off the water. What can I do? Well, I can find another hat somewhere. Look, he ends up with sunglasses and a hat. So the problem solving involved there was brilliant. He just kept reframing, letting go of what he couldn't control, right? Getting off of that ruminating track and getting back onto, so what if I don't have my resources? I'm sure I'll be able to find them or ask for help. You find that with the thriving research too, right? Asking for help. So, and not only though, did he come up with solutions, reframe, but I think in that process, and this is kind of just a very loose theory that we're working with now, that when people are able to problem solve insightfully like that, in a very, it feels like an untenable, wicked, very stressful, but work your way through that and engage your insight problem solving skills, you actually expand your capacity beyond what you would have been capable of. So he's a case in point. Goes out for this race, not even expected to really medal, wins a gold. And I really, again, it's just a theory, but I've got a few stories that illustrate this. And I want you all to watch as well. Pay attention to what you see out in the world. Notice that when people problem solve really insightfully like that, where there's a bit of a letting go or reframe, and then that creative solution, watch what they're capable of afterward. I've seen it with little kids. I've seen it with the Vikes. I work with the Vikes sometimes, the basketball team. They do remarkable things. Michael Conley, another great example, and then I'll move on. Triple jumper. He's got the gold medal sewn up. He has jumped twice. He's way ahead of the field. He's going to win. He's got a couple more jumps left. On his next jump, which he just had to complete, really, he would have still won. He foot faults. So if he does it again, he's going to be disqualified. You know how it works, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy. So as soon as you're kind of focused on a threat, you're going to probably create that threat. If you're skiing through trees and you look at the trees, you're going to hit the trees. So he needed to really reframe at that moment in order to not foot fault again. Funny thing in sport, people will say, well, don't do this. As soon as you say don't foot fault, that's all you hear. So he was a remarkable guy. He talked about afterward how he stopped for a moment and thought, I could lose the gold medal. So what's the problem with that? He realized, well, the worst thing would be that my family has supported me so hugely through this, and I don't want to, let them down. And then he realized, yeah, but what's the problem with that? So what if I let my family down? He realized they would never be let down. They love him no matter what, and all they've ever wanted is that he just do his best. Right there, bing, there's the insight, right? Reframe, let go of what I can't control. Yes, I foot faulted. I might again. So what's the real challenge here? The real challenge is simply to jump. Do my best. And so he did, and guess what? World record. So not only the gold, but goes beyond and jumps the jump of his life. And then, of course, we know about Clara Hughes. And of course, when I first started talking about Clara Hughes, we didn't know all the challenges she'd been facing all along, right? But her story is struggling through this one particularly difficult year, and then drilling down, reframing, and realizing it was all about just loving skating and loving being on the ice. She wrote the word joy on her hand. So every time it swung in front of her, she'd see it's just about joy, right? Silken Laumann, my favorite little rower, and had a wicked injury at a certain race a few months before the Olympics, loses half of her calf, sheared off. Smashes her ankle, dumped into freezing water. She's flown back home. That bandage on her, the bandage on her leg is a skin graft. She's competing at the Olympics after that traumatic injury 3 months later. We heard when she'd been flown back home that she was lifting weights in her hospital bed. so determined. But talking with her afterward, she just reframed, let go of what she couldn't control, the injury, and accepted it, and looked elsewhere for resources. She had an amazing team around her, creative individuals coming up with solutions to every barrier she faced all along. She gets to the Olympics, wins a bronze medal. It was awesome to watch. And so we've generated this model of integrated focus, we call it. Typically an individual facing some sort of challenge, the barriers in their way, something gets in the way, like Silken's injury. And typically people are told to, get rid of the barrier. Well, can she heal her injury in 3 months? She still had a very sore ankle, and she was still missing half her calf when she won that bronze medal. Remarkable, eh? She's a Wonder Woman. And but people would typically focus on the barrier and try and kind of get rid of it, battle it. The other solution typically is that people are told, well, forget about your injury and just carry on. Forget about that barrier and just get the job done. That doesn't work because physiologically, we can't let go of barriers. They're just going to take our attention. If we perceive them to be threatening, we're going to focus on them no matter what. It always wins. So that just do it concept is, I think, kind of cruel. What we propose instead is to acknowledge the barrier, acknowledge that you may not be able to knock it over, and instead ask yourself, what's it getting in the way of? And that way you're reframing. So not only is it a barrier, but also your goal is revealed. Ask what it gets in the way of, it reveals your goal again, and you have this more integrated focus. You're acknowledging, yep, we might have to operate within an O drive, but what is it we're actually trying to achieve? We get so fixated on our barriers that we forget about what we're trying to achieve. Bring the two together and you'll unlock your creative solutions. So like Adam Van Couverton, I don't have my materials to get ready, but I do need to race. How can I prepare, given that I don't have? He's very creative and ended up expanding his capacity. So how do I resolve the challenges the barrier poses to my goal? Include both. And even today, my past supervisor is very reluctant to include barriers. And I think they're the key. They're literally a springboard to solutions. So don't be afraid of walls. We have our own here. That's why I use the picture of the castle. We've got a great metaphor facing us every day in more ways than one. What's the real problem? What does the barrier get in the way of? Those are the questions you need to be asking, and we don't tend to ask them very often. So here's another kind of visual. We tend to hammer against the barrier. If we drill down, we actually reveal the goal again. You're not ignoring the barrier, but you're bringing into focus both things. Another way to look at it, typically, you think about an organization, employees want more resources, organizations want resources, and they end up fighting over time or resources. Productivity, autonomy, it could be any number of factors or elements that we're sort of fighting over. And we create these wide boundaries around what we're trying to protect. And then it becomes that we're fighting over something in between. But when you drill down and get clear on what it is we're actually seeking, specific resources or this concept of freedom and autonomy, well, we can achieve that without having to impinge on each other's territories in a way, right? The key is to drill down and get clear on what it is you're actually trying to achieve. I have a little case here. We've taken this research into more applied settings, teachers, workplace injury. I actually rode around in a garbage truck for a while. Go back, because I'll read it aloud. It's hard to read and listen at the same time. I worked with garbage collectors 1 year. We've taken it into lots of different applied settings, but I love, of course, working with teachers in education because I think, it's really imperative that we solve some of these untenable solutions or problems and come up with more insightful solutions. And so we interviewed lots of different teachers from different contexts and different kinds of schools, and one of the main just a key case that came up was this one, the idea of the large class sizes. And I know it's something that we struggle with here sometimes too, right? The idea that we have these big classes, and how do we deal with them? And of course, it's been on the radar for so long with teachers and the BCTF and the ministry in BC as well, and in Ontario. So one teacher explained that what really bothered him was that he didn't, oh, this is a different case, I'm sorry, didn't feel recognized. Wait a second, pause. I had a couple in my mind, and there's another one I talk about in a second. Just go ahead, yeah. So large class sizes. And one of the big issues around large class sizes, when we drilled down with these people and tried to get beyond the barrier of large class sizes, is having 36 voices, for instance, in a grade 5 classroom that's built for 25. It's about management and discipline. Really hard to hear 36 voices, or 50 voices in some of our classes, right? It can be really hard to hear it all, or attend to them all online, and it becomes more about kind of managing. You don't really feel like you're connecting. And when we drill down further, well, what's the problem with that? What's that getting in the way of? We reveal that, well, there are fewer resources, there's less time then for each individual student and learner. It then starts to feel very inefficient, unsatisfactory. It has implications for the teacher, right? They start to lose morale and lose a sense of purpose or value or impact as well. And it just starts to feel prohibitive. To what? To real teaching and learning. So what is that? We ask the teachers to unpack that further. You see, as you drill down, you get clear and away from we can't, and this is a problem, and I don't like this, and we hate this, to because this is what we want. We want improved conditions for actual teaching and learning. Does it have to be small class sizes? Because the other factor here is limited resources, maybe. Okay? So are there other creative solutions? So maybe for now, we have limited resources, large class sizes. How can we improve our conditions for teaching and learning in this situation? What are some ideas? How do you get one-on-one connection with 50 students in a class? Right? Talking to each other as well. Give them, that's why I love online, right? More opportunity for more voices to be heard. And other people can be listening. It doesn't always have to be you, right? They're learning, especially here, learning from one another. You can structure a lesson with little kids too, where they're learning from each other. You can reach out, bring other people in. You can collaborate with other teachers and bring the classes, actually make the classes bigger, right? Sometimes the solution is actually going bigger, flipping it the other way to allow for greater teaching and learning. So that was one case. The other one, sorry, that I meant to get to was this one. A teacher said that he struggled with lack of recognition. And I know recognition is a huge one in organizations as well. How do we recognize or acknowledge the work of people? Whenever I consult to organizations and we drill down to the core issue is usually that people just want to know their work matters. Work matters. How do I fit in? What's my role? I see it in sports too, right? Everybody needs a role on the floor or on the team. So he explained that what really bothered him was he didn't feel recognized for what he had to offer. So I drilled down, asked him about the problems that this lack of recognition poses. And he explained, well, if they, his bosses or whoever, don't get what I'm capable of, then I won't have opportunities to accomplish anything. So you see the language there is still quite negative. I won't have. So I asked him, what bothered you about that? What's the problem with a lack of opportunity? I won't be able to implement any of my ideas, any of the skills I possess, and that I continue to feel shut down. So I kept drilling down. What's the problem with that? What bothers you most about feeling shut down? So all I'm doing is just pushing a little further. What bothers you about that? What bothers you about that? We can do that with any problem in our organization. We can do that with the O drive. You know, what actually bugs us about it, right? What's it getting in the way of? Is it actually a barrier? He then explained that, well, the problem with feeling shut down is he actually wanted to help. He had good ideas to share. So see the shift in language from I can't and I won't and they don't and to I want. So you'll see that shift. That's the insight. That's the aha. He's now revealed his goals on the other side of the barriers. They're not listening. They're not noticing. They're not. And they might not be because they're too busy or whatever. Until now, he's focused on gaining that leadership, making them listen, making them notice him, when he suddenly realizes actually his goal is to share his ideas and to help. It's totally different. Okay? So instead of fixating on the barrier, figure out what your actual goal is. I asked him how he might be able to go about helping and sharing his ideas, and he suggested he could work with the head of his PE department, explain that he wanted to help. He could explain his ideas, develop some strategies for implementing even ahead of time and then sharing, and be supportive of the department as a whole. And it just suddenly, you could see this whole paradigm shift in his approach. And now he felt equipped and he could move forward. He wasn't just banging his head against this perceived barrier, okay? And real barrier for him. The barrier isn't the problem, it's just this thing in the way. It's just a reality. Working with athletes is interesting because they'll see the rain as a barrier or the field conditions as a barrier or the wind. The wind isn't evil. It's something we need. But it can be a perceptual thing and very real for them. So I've been talking about the O-Drive a lot just because it's something, we joke about a lot, and it's something that it seems like a big maze, especially when you're orienting someone new and you show them the O-Drive and they just go, my God. So if we think about the O-Drive, is it actually a problem? Is it a barrier? What is it? Something new, right? Yeah, it's all about perspective. But so what is the O-Drive? If I was to explain to someone who had never been here before, what is it? A repository for information. Okay? Lots of information, all in one place. Is there a problem with it? See multiple copies. What else? Any other problems? Does it cause any problems for us? See, Colleen's insightful, right? She's already gone to the solution end of things. Awesome. I'd like you to try just drilling down on the O-Drive for a minute with a buddy or three or whatever and thinking about, what is it? What are some of the barriers that come up when we're talking about information? We're an organization and we rely on information, especially as an educational organization. So what is it about this repository of information that is challenging? What are some of the barriers? What are things that get in our way? And then start to drill. If you identify a barrier, something that's actually getting in your way, making you feel kind of stuck about information at railroads, drill down on it. Ask yourself, well, what's that getting in the way of? What's that getting in the way of? What's that getting in the way of? What bothers me about it? What bugs me about it? Very simple questions, but be persistent. Drill it down, and then you'll find, it's revealed what it is you're actually seeking from information at railroads. And try then to figure out a way to achieve that, given that we're operating in this kind of, complicated, redundant, but it's what we have. It's our beloved O-Drive. So it's what we live in. It's our reality. How can we achieve what we have, even though there's some barriers that it throws up for us, okay? And see how that goes for you. The lightning bolt is that space that I talked about earlier where the creative ideas can emerge because you've framed it more holistically. Give it a go. Let me know how it goes, and I'll check in a minute. I just want to share a couple more things that come out of this insight problem-solving thing that I think is helpful for organizations. This is one of the little exercises we do with individuals when we're doing the more lab experimental study on people. The 9 dot, it's like a classic insight problem. Drawing 4 straight lines, pass through all 9 dots without taking your pencil off the page or reversing over a line. And people typically they draw that first line there, and then they kind of try to make the next 3 lines link up all the dots, and they get stuck. And there's always 1 dot left over. Dun, 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 dun. And they try all these different combinations. Of course, the insight is that you don't actually have enough line. Therefore, you have to make the line work harder. So you extend the line, and it includes more dots. There's the insight. Interestingly, under stress, even though I know that solution, I can't do it. When a bunch of people are staring at me, it's really hard. So again, that illustrates that under stress, we don't problem solve very well. You need to stop, reframe, really frame the problem correctly, and you'll unlock that insight better. But this is such a great illustration of a problem all organizations face, in that it's usually about limited resources, right? As Colleen was saying, UBC wanted to impose some system for research ethics on them, or some software. And Colleen said, if it ain't free, and if it isn't, accessible, and these principles that railroads operates on, which are principles of sustainability, making resources count for more, being integrative, sharing, We don't want a part of it. We can't have a part of it because it just is unsustainable. And these problems illustrate that really well. Another really classic one is this one. Arrange the 12 coins so that each side of the hexagon has 4 coins. And each side is each side. There's no trickery of word play or anything. And people typically lay out the coins like this, making them count, for 2 sides, right? Making each resource count for more. But then they get stuck here, and they stop. And they want to put the coins in between, so you have 3 on each side, and kind of feel like that's a solution. But of course, it isn't really the solution that we're asking for, and there is a way to have 4 on each side. How do you do it? Anybody? Do it again. You make them count for more again. And people, interestingly, don't think of that. And you'll notice it in organizations as well. You don't think to use a system that's working over here and apply it over there. So I wanted to finish with some little highlights from railroads that we're really good at integrating and elaborating on an idea. So we have a great idea, and then we build off of it. Okay? And you can probably think of lots of examples, but here's a good one. We came up with just recently that, hey, we have all this data in our travel requests. Why don't we share that with marketing so that they can coordinate recruitment? When they're on the road, they know that Charles is on the road too. But to expect Charles to just tell them whenever he's going on the road, it's not going to happen. He's getting ready to go on the road, right? But if the travel request information, hey, if they can highlight, those people can highlight to marketing that these people are here and here and here and here, coordinate that information, would be great. Another example is grant applications, and this came up in a conversation with Grania yesterday, or the other day. In our grant applications, we have to actually specifically say how our work aligns with the principles of Royal Roads, the mandate of Royal Roads. It's great exercise to go through because you're constantly reflecting on what we're here for, what we believe in. Why wouldn't we apply that in other contexts? For any kind of application for anything. The Ethics Review Board, we were looking at the Curriculum Committee and revising the Curriculum Committee, decentralizing it because it was really complex and unwieldy. And we suddenly realized, oh, we already do this really well with the Ethics Review Board. Why wouldn't we just apply the same principle to the Curriculum Committee? This is happening all over the place, but we could do it more, right? We're doing something great over here. Why don't we try it over there as well, even though it's 2 different contexts? Principles of, and we have a great thesis process now. Why wouldn't we apply that to any approval process and make everything paperless and formless, please? And so walls don't have to be walls. This is shooting up into the blue sky. There's lots of windows there and doors and opportunities. Remember that barriers, once you've identified what the barrier is, it actually is just like a doorway to what you're trying to achieve. It's a pathway to your goals and your values. And once you use the barrier to lead you to that, you've reframed the problem in a more insightful way. Go forth and be insightful. Thank you very much.